All right, good morning, you guys. We're going to be starting today's Sparkplug service, and we're going to be looking at how we change spark plugs, why we change, when we change, those kinds of things. And there's your spark plug there. And first of all, why and when we change. So the center to side electrode contact, and I'll try and put that up in front of my hand to get it to focus on it. Those tend to wear. There you go. It's a pretty good picture. And we need a spark to jump between those at idle of about 7,000 to 10,000 volts. And when we're going up the grade and there's lots of cylinder pressure, it might be anywhere from 20 to 30,000 volts and can be even higher. And so this center to side electrode contact area will wear, and the consequence of that wearing out and getting larger and larger and larger is we'll typically damage a coil. Modern coils do fail because they're not liquid cooled like they used to be back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. And then starting in the mid 80s, we went to solid coils, which don't have that non-conductive cooling oil inside them, and coils start to fail when people don't service their plugs. Most manufacturers will recommend used to be the standard 30,000 mile replacement for plugs. Really old school, we used to do it every 15,000. 30,000 is more what people do today or recommend today. Yes, there are laser iridium plugs with a platinum tip and all this stuff, and people say, okay, you can go 100,000 between services. I'm here to tell you that, in my opinion, I change them every year at 15,000. Now, that's kind of overkill, but what I find is it's easier to start, fuel economy is a little better, performance is a little better. It's slight. Is there a big difference between changing them at 15 and 30? Probably not. Just being realistic. But I think in the interest of maintenance and having the car run well for good fuel economy, good performance and drivability, and emit low emissions, I think it makes sense. Plugs are relatively cheap. Doesn't matter which plugs you buy. Well, I'm of the opinion yes, although some might disagree. For example, NGK plugs are original equipment in all Japanese cars. I would highly recommend using NGK plugs. When it comes to a General Motors product, I would use AC Delco, although I will use NGK plugs from time to time in my own General Motors vehicle. If it's a Ford, I would either use NGK or Motorcraft plugs. If it's a Chrysler, you always use Champion plugs. Now, somebody watching this who knows more than I do, which are plenty of people, might say, hey, but I found something different, and that's fine, and I understand. Let's talk about platinum plugs for a moment. This is a non-platinum plug version. It's got just a regular iron side electrode and an iron center electrode. There are different versions of platinum plugs. You have a platinum plug where it's just got a little platinum disc on top of the side electrode, and then you got double platinums where there's a disc of platinum on top of the, I pointed to the center and I meant to say center. But there's also double platinum plugs where you have a little platinum disc on the center and side electrode. Platinum is very long wearing. What I have found is platinum pretty much does not wear, but I have found that you get a platinum disc and you leave the spark plug in there long, and the spark starts jumping off the iron part underneath the disc and undercuts the area where the platinum is. So I find that the iron is more readily gives up electrons than the platinum. The platinum is certainly longer wearing. So because of all that, my opinion is I don't think platinum plugs are worth the cost, because a lot of cases, the electricity doesn't jump, or the spark doesn't jump off the platinum. But when you have, like, Delco uses a platinum plug that's just got a wire tip that's completely covered, or the NGKG Power Platinum, which is completely covered in platinum, and then there's no iron exposed for electrons to jump off, then that seems to make sense to me. But what makes the most sense to me is you don't really need fancy, very expensive plugs as long as you change them frequently and keep them gapped properly. That's my opinion. Can you go a little bit larger on gap and get a little more performance? Some people talk about, yes, you can, as long as it's within reason, as long as you change them regularly. So how do we gap plugs? So we've answered the question why we change them, what we can hope to get out of it, when I suggest you change them. I'm going to put my glasses on here so I can see a little better. So most Delco plugs are gapped around 45 to 50 thousandths. This one is sitting right now, there's 44, and it just about goes in there. And when we put this little gauge in there, and there's numbers here, we can gap it to what the book says. Now, I'm going to attach a little video at the end of this that shows you looking up in Mitchell ProDemand where you can get the specs for adjusting plug gap. I'll pause, I'll look it up, and we'll gap them, and then we'll go on and replace them. One sec. So as I looked up the specification for gapping the plugs, I found out they're 40 thousandths. This one only goes down to 44, so I'm going to grab one that goes down to 40. So here's a gapper that goes down to 40. You can see the different measurements on there, and there's 40 thousandths right there. Sorry, right there. And this tool here is made to close the gap and open the gap. So I'm going to go ahead and take my 40 thousandths, and I want to slip it between there, and it's pretty loose. Now I can just leave that. It's not super loose, but then I just tighten up so it's just a little tiny bit of drag as it goes through. So that's gapped at 40, and that center electrode is straight over this, the side electrode's straight over the center electrode. And when they're not straight over, and that one at 40, there's a nice little tug there. When they're not straight over it, I'll take a pair of needle nose pliers and square them up so that they are right over them. This one's a little bit on the loose side. So it's interesting. Sometimes I find, and I'm just tightening it up with that tool, still a little bit on the loose side. I find that plugs like NGK plugs come all pre-gapped really accurately, and then other brands don't. I'm a fan of NGKs. I just think they do a really great job. And again, I'm just trying to close that down just a hair. There we go. There's a little bit there. A little bit of drag. Here's plug number 4. And that one's actually quite large gap, so I closed it up a bit. There we go. Get our 40 in there. It's good. Okay, it's nice and centered. Get my 5th one. Getting them all ready ahead of time. And this one is needs to be tightened up a little bit. There we go. That's good. And my 6th one. Just checking them all. That one's real loose, so I'm going to go ahead and snug it up. Oh, I think I went down too far. And so I'll just, sometimes I can just put my guy in there and kind of pry them apart a little bit. It's interesting, some of these plugs, the side electrode on this one extends all the way over the center electrode, and this one it's kind of back further, which is, just shows the quality is not so perfect on these, but it's okay. They'll work. They're decent plugs. Just some manufacturers just do a better job on how they put them together and how they gap them, and that one's good. Okay, and then my last one. That one is just a little bit loose, so we'll just, still a little loose. So we can close these up and open them up. There we go. Okay, so all my plugs here on the bench are all gapped. Now I'll just show you a little bit about tools. I really like to use a long ratchet with a flex head so I can get a good angle down in there, and the length gives me some torque to break spark plugs loose. There's basically 2 types of spark plugs. There are gasketed and there are tapered seat. You don't see many tapered seat plugs like this anymore, where it just goes down and stops, and the ProDemand says you're supposed to torque these to 11 foot-pounds. I don't normally use a torque wrench on them, but you can, and that's not a bad idea. So here's some extensions, and this extension in particular, this one's got a wobbler end on it, which gives you a little bit of angle. This one's a straight one. I like to use the wires. Spark plug sockets have a boot down inside, and the purpose of that boot, I don't know if you can see it in there, is that when we take the spark plug out, the spark plug comes out in the socket. This is a 13/16, which is kind of an old school size. Most everything is 5/8 today. There is a Toyota with a spark plug that's 12 millimeter, a really long one, on the Corolla, and it's got a boot in there. And then there's a, let's see what this one is. And then there's a, sorry, that is a 14 millimeter. Sorry, these are both 14 millimeter spark plug sockets, a short one and a long one. And there is such thing as a 12 millimeter one that I don't have out here. Here's a pair of spark plug wire, insulated wire pliers. A lot of times I just use these, although you got to be careful that you don't cut the wire. One thing you want to do when you pull the spark plug wire off is to twist it and break it loose, because especially on General Motors products, where the spark plugs, and I'll show you where they are down here, are between the exhaust manifold runners, and you can see down in here, as I point down, let me get the camera just a little closer. So you can see these spark plug wires here, and when they go down to the spark plugs here, they have a heat shield, but they're right next to the exhaust manifold, and so the rubber of the spark plug boot will tend to weld itself onto the spark plug. And so for that reason, when we put new spark plugs in, we'll take what's called dielectric grease and put a little bit on the porcelain of the spark plug. And the purpose of doing that, sorry it's so bright there, but the purpose of doing that is to prevent the spark plugs from, so to speak, welding themselves to the spark plug wires, from welding themselves to the spark plugs. So I'll take this spark plug wire and sort of twist and then pull on it, and it's not coming off for me readily. So I'll try this insulated spark plug pliers, and I'm going to bring the camera over. Hopefully I don't make you seasick doing it. And try to bring the camera so you can be quite a bit closer and see what I'm doing down in here. I think that looks better there. So I'm going to grab this guy, and I'm going to twist, trying to get it to come off without breaking the wire, and a lot of times they break. Okay, so that one popped off, and it did not break inside there. You can't quite see, it's not focusing real well, but the inside in there, it did stay intact. The other side popped off, and that stayed intact as well. And I'm sorry that it's not focusing super clear. This does have individual coils. There's a coil here, a coil here, and a coil here. So those are individual coil per cylinder. I'm going to put the wire back onto there. And there's that spark plug. And I'm going to take my 3/8 swivel ratchet with a 3/8 extension and a rigid 5/16 spark plug socket, and I'm going to get it on there. And I'm going to break this, go in the off position, get that guy loosened. From there it comes. And it's a little sticky. It's not coming out super smooth. So don't like that, but it's the way it is. And so we're going to pull this guy out. Yeah, like I said, it's a little sticky on the threads. It's like not loosening up really easily. That's kind of atypical. But when you get one like on an aluminum cylinder head, and this is this is an aluminum cylinder head, but when you get one on an aluminum cylinder head that doesn't want to loosen up, sometimes they'll actually start loosening and then they'll get tighter. So sometimes what we'll do is we'll loosen, tighten, loosen, tighten, loosen, tighten, and then if we're careful, and I've spent literally 15 minutes before on one plug, but we get it out and we don't damage the threads. If we do damage the threads, we do have a spark plug tap that we can run through to clean the threads up. So I'm going to get this guy out, and I'm surprised how long it's taking to get this plug out. And so Mr. L's like, hey, what's going on? Am I getting this thing out or what? Now it feels like it's just about out. That's a long threaded plug. There, and I did finally get it out. Okay, so what I'm seeing here is this plug is in here, and it's got super long amount of threads. And I don't think this is the correct plug. And the reason why I don't think it's the correct plug is that it's got all this thread seemingly exposed in the cylinder, and that's what made it hard to come out. It was kind of gummed up. So I've got an R44 LTSM in here, and the one that was in there was a different plug. So I'm going to go double check the application, make sure I have the right plugs, and make sure these were the wrong ones. So let me pause and check Napa ProLink. All right, so I went to Napa ProLink and did confirm that the spark plugs that were in here were the wrong ones. You should never have had all this thread, and so that's why I was wondering, why is it taking me so long to get out of there? This thread was hanging in there, and it's got combustion gases boogering up the threads. Now, when you look at this plug, the side electrode is eaten away, kind of like at an angle like that. So this is a platinum plug. It's a double platinum, but it's pretty eaten away. So we are expecting troubles as we do these plugs. Let me explain. As I go ahead and change these plugs, I'm expecting it to be difficult. As I put the first one in here, I'm expecting it to be difficult to get all of these out because of the carbon that's on the threads that were way too long and aren't supposed to be in there so long in this engine. So I'm going to go ahead and start it by hand and grab my spark plug socket and see if I can start winding the spark plug in. And you know, if it wants to go in, and it is going in, but it's albeit slowly, and so it's going in. So I'm going to grab a fixed ratchet for one. I'm a little sensitive to how this is going in, so I'm going to put a fixed ratchet on it so I feel like I can control it. And it is going in just fine right now. In fact, it's going in so fine I can pretty much run it in just by hand. And I'm tightening it up. I'm going to get a little bit longer extension just to make it a little easier for me to reach and not rub my fingers against everything under the engine compartment here. So I think we're just about in there. Let's see if I am. Yep, there it is. It's snugged up. So I'm just going to snug. Now they say 11 foot-pounds. That's not very tight. In reality, I've probably gone closer to 15, 20 foot-pounds right there. Not trying to, but it's just not very much torque. So that first one's in. Now we're going to do the second one. So I'm going to grab my spark plug boot pliers and grab that second one and twist, and hopefully don't break it so I don't have to replace the wires. Twist, trying to break it loose and pull. Oh, it's not coming out of there. I'm not surprised. There, it finally came out. And in this one, I'm kind of looking on there to see if the end is down in there. Yeah, it's down in there. So I got that one off. And next I'm going to go down in there. Let me see if I can reposition it so you can see even better. Let's see where it is. So here I am down here. You can't really see that so much. What if I come way down in here? Put that camera right there. And now I'm down here. And that spark plug is there. Now you can see the tip of the spark plug down in there. Down in there, and my camera just kind of fouls. Give me a moment. Try to finish this guy. There's our spark plug there. And we'll go down in there, and I don't think I'm going to take you time to show you all 8 of these, but I will do at least. Okay, this one wasn't very tight, which is fine. I will do a couple of them. And again, these are hard coming out because the carbon. So that's a problem. So I'm going to start going back in a little bit and try and loosen up and come back out. So I can see doing these plugs is going to be a challenge because they got the wrong ones in there. I'm going to go loosen and tighten. And maybe I could use some penetrant and get some penetrant down in the threads. I'll give it a shot. So let me pause the camera and give it a shot and try a little penetrant. So I have been going back and forth, loosening and tightening to when you tighten it, sometimes it relieves the threads, and then you can go a little bit forward. You can hear it kind of moaning. I've been spraying JB80, which is a penetrant, and seems to help a little bit. And I'm still working this thing, but I think I finally got it. But you have to know, boy, I took my time. This is about 5 minutes with this one plug, just so I don't end up damaging threads or breaking the spark plug. When I get this one out, and I am working pretty hard for this one, just to make sure that I don't damage it. Sorry, I know it's hard to see down in there, but I'm holding my left hand on the, you'll notice I'm holding my left hand, or at least let me move the camera so you can see a little bit better here. I'm holding my left hand on the ratchet like this. Let me see if it'll focus. There it goes. On the ratchet down here, holding my left hand here to keep it straight so I don't put a side load like that or like that on the spark plug and ends up breaking. And it's not the end of the world if it breaks, but we'd like it to come out cleanly. And this one is finally coming out cleanly. Now let me get it out the rest of the way by hand. And that was some work, because again, these are the wrong plugs. These have way too much thread on them. And you can see my penetrant did get down in there. Okay, so the threads are lubricated up. So that's a good sign. I'm looking at this plug and I'm like, wow, look at the gap on that. Let me see if you can see it. Let me hold it a little bit better. That gap is really worn out. The side electrodes are really worn. That's probably an 80 thousandth gap. Sorry, I keep getting my hand up. So now I'm ready to put the second plug in. Let me put the camera back up top so you guys can see better. And so I think I'm going to have to put some secret sauce in all these. My JB80, which is a really good penetrant. We call it secret sauce. I have to put my secret sauce on these. I might even put just a tiny bit. I just put a little bit on the threads just going in, just because I've got enough trouble with these already that I think I need it. So I'm just winding this guy in here. The only other thing I want to say, and then we're going to, because I'm not going to run the whole video for this whole time, is that, again, I could put a little bit of dielectric grease. And on these, I probably should. But I just want to underscore, and this is a good example of how patient you need to be. Most guys like, oh, I want to change plugs in 5 minutes. And a lot of cars, that's the way it goes. But one like this, that hasn't been serviced correctly, really needs some work. So let me clip that other video together for you, showing you how to look up the plug gap and the plugs on ProLink and ProDemand, and we'll go from there. Thanks so much. All right, you guys, I'm going to show you first on Mitchell ProDemand how we can go in and look up spark plug service specifications, both the gap and the torque. We've got a 2008 Chevrolet Silverado, and it is a 4.8 liter, which is the engine code C, and it is an extra cab. It is not a four-wheel drive, so rear-wheel drive, so we're going to click Use this vehicle. Now, some of you will go straight to searching. I typically go to Service Manual, and I always go to Engine Perf when I want engine performance for ignition stuff, and Specifications is the normal place, but here it only has firing order and cylinder identification, so it doesn't have anything about spark plugs. Mode 6 is emissions data information, and under emissions, it doesn't have anything there for spark plugs. Testing and diagnostics, it has engine controls and fuels. Maybe it's in here. Let's check for 4.8 liter. Let's take a look. Doesn't look like it. It just has diagnostic strategy, and there's the second sheet. Okay, here it has, there we go. There's specs and ignition system specs. There they are. And here comes firing order, spark plug wire resistance, spark plug torque, 15 Newton meters, 11 foot-pounds, spark plug gap, 1.02 millimeters or 0.040 inches, and the type of plug, which is a 41-985, which is definitely not the plug that that was in there. It had a different plug than that. What I'm going to do is show you another way you could do this. If you just go up here and click on the search function, and then you just type in Sparkplug gap, and there it is, keyword search Sparkplug gap, and it comes up under engine controls, and there it shows a picture of a spark plug, and it says inspect the gap, refer to this ignition system specs, and it takes you right back to that spot where it's got that 0.040 gap. So that's how we can see that. Next, we'll look at Napa ProLink, where we can look up the plugs. So again, 08 Chevrolet Silverado 1500, there it is, 4.8 liter, there it is. And we can use the quick picks here for spark plug and hit search, or it's under category ignition system and subcategory ignition parts and filters. And so here they're showing all different brands of plugs, and I opted for the Delco non-platinum plugs. There's the double platinum, and the rapid fires are fine. They're okay. They've got kind of a fluted center electrode. But I just went for the conventional R44 LTSM and got those plugs, and there they are. You can see that that the set of spark plug wires from NGK are $72, and let's see, there's a Belden premium set that's in stock at Napa for $56.99, and I've had good luck with those. I typically stay away from the mileage plus ones. I think the Belden lifetime premium ones are better if you need spark plug wires. In this case, spark plug wires so far are okay. So that's how you can look up your spark plugs and your spark plug gap, and that is it for now.